In 1822, Thomas Jefferson said this about our faith. He said, "I confidently expect that the present generation will see Unitarianism become the general religion of the United States." Now, I happen to believe he was only a couple of generations off. It's serious. But if we are going to get there, and I believe we will, we have to change our entire relationship to our faith. You and I do. First, you may have noticed I called this our faith, our religion, our religious denomination. It's not a social movement. It's not a club or a society. Unitarian Universalism is a religion. You can quote me. Now, because our religion upholds our fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, we are a religion without a creed. However, we do have some core essential beliefs that unify us. We believe in original blessing and not original sin. We believe in universal salvation and reconciliation, not an afterlife of eternal doom. We believe heaven and hell are created here on earth. We believe each life has worth and dignity. We believe all life is interconnected and interdependent. We believe Jesus was a great rabbi and prophet in human form. And beyond that, as the prescription says, results may vary. Thanks. Now, it occurred to me recently that I have not yet shared with you my moment of call. In ministry, this is the moment when one feels the call from God or Spirit. And most calls to ministry experiences are like a snowball rolling down a mountain over time, gathering speed until it is too large to ignore, and you must get out of its way or succumb to the avalanche. But for me, there were a couple of moments, but I actually did have one clear moment of call, and for me it was more like cymbals being smashed in front of my face. It was the last Sunday in July in 2008. I was living in Asheville, North Carolina, and working somewhat ambivalently as the Director of Religious Education at the UU congregation of Asheville. 7 days earlier, a man had walked into my home congregation where I was a youth in Knoxville, Tennessee, the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church, during Sunday services, holding a guitar case. And in the guitar case was a rifle. And in the middle of a children's performance during Sunday worship, this man opened fire on my congregation, full of my friends and mentors, my church family, killing 2 people and wounding 6 others, before my best friend's dad and the board president rushed him and wrestled him to the ground. The UU trauma response team flew down and spent the following week with the congregation, and it was decided that the following Sunday they would reconsecrate the sanctuary, making it once again a safe space. The current Director of Religious Education was too traumatized to re-enter the building, and so I volunteered to drive over and serve as the Director of Religious Education for the day. And the service was about to begin. Everyone had gathered, with all the former ministers of that congregation had also flown in. Everyone had gathered when I realized the youth group was not there. They were late. And I remember walking out, asking them to hold the service, walking out and finding the high school youth group sitting in their room in the dark, alone, no adults with them, asking themselves what they were going to do. They were quiet, dazed, traumatized. I came to them and I explained that I had recently been a high school youth group member at that church. I had sat in those couches where they were sitting. I had been one of them. And I invited them to come with me into the sanctuary. I promised them they could sit together and that I would stay with them. We held hands as we walked into the sanctuary, creating a chain of support. And I brought them into the very center of the sanctuary, about there, where they could sit on the floor, protected by the pews all around them. And as we entered the white, light-filled sanctuary, you could see spatters of blood on the walls and on the pews. The youth sat together in a huddle. They made a fortress of their bodies, leaning into each other. And I sat with them. Together we held each other and all sang Spirit of Life. And at that moment, I experienced utter certainty. I knew I would give the rest of my life to this faith that had created a refuge for these kids, gay, transgender, Latino, Black, white, and that I would devote my life to the cause of Unitarian Universalism and religious freedom. And I have never looked back since that day. Now, that congregation was proud of its ecclesial work. In the years leading up to the shooting, they had a banner that read very plainly throughout the 90s, "We welcome gays and lesbians." The minister was always on the front page of the paper, speaking at rallies against gun violence, marrying gay people though it was against the law, speaking out against charter schools and redlining. And as a high schooler, I was persecuted every day in Knoxville for my heathenism. But since that shooting, the city of Knoxville has rallied around the church. They've lifted it up. Knoxville's making it a central player in interfaith work in the city. And Knoxville's two most recent mayors were a part of that congregation. Now, I remember when the local news station interviewed the Unitarian Universalist Association national president, Bill Singford, who came down after the shooting for the reconsecration service. The news reporter asked him on camera if we UUs believed that the shooter was going to hell. And I will never forget Reverend Bill's response. He said, "We don't have to send him to hell. He is already there." Someone with that much hate in his heart is already living in hell, and our hearts go out to him. The reporter was stunned. It was the best expression of universalism I had ever witnessed in my life. The prosecutor wanted the death penalty for the killer, but the congregation testified and fought hard for him to be sentenced to life in prison without parole, which was the sentence that was granted. Now, this was a shining moment for Unitarian Universalism, and in the years that followed, the membership exploded at TVUUC, and it continues to thrive and grow today. So you see, the stakes are very high for me. That this is a matter of life and death, what we are doing here. And when I say we are saving lives, I mean it. That is what I mean. Now, I am excited about the future of our faith in this moment. I am particularly excited about the future of our faith in Atlanta and across the Southeast. See, we have a UU congregation of Atlanta with a new senior minister recently renovating a centrally located, beautiful property. We also have a church plant on the west side in Reverend Duncan Teague's Abundant Love congregation. Very exciting. We have a brand new dean of spiritual life and head chaplain at Emory University who is a Unitarian Universalist minister. Never had this before. And we have exciting new ministers also in Sandy Springs and Roswell. We have so many healthy, vibrant ministries in this time. And we are starting to show up at more interfaith tables. I have been asked to join the inaugural board of the Georgia Interfaith Public Policy Center, a network of faith leaders who advocate, educate, and lobby for the common good. Reverend Raphael Warnock from Ebenezer Baptist Church sits on this board with me, as does Rabbi Peter Berg from the Temple and Bishop Robert Wright of the Episcopal Diocese of Atlanta and many more longtime Atlanta leaders. So this is the situation we find ourselves in 2019. Now this is a dark time, I know, full of political division and legislative bigotry, rising sea levels and climate denial, mass incarceration of Black and brown people, and forced child separation of migrants. And this is our time of call. The world needs us to thrive, to offer a slice of heaven in the way we model religious tolerance and cultural diversity, authentic cultural diversity. But what if we never shared our faith with anyone? Here is what is at stake. If we do not share our faith, then we will acquiesce religion to people who would use it to spread hate, division, and weaponize it for political gain. They will get religion. Now, growing up in East Tennessee, I remember a series of billboards that graced the skyline in the late 90s. Perhaps you remember them too. It was a giant black billboard with huge white letters featuring phrases such as, "Let's meet at my house Sunday before the game." Dash God. Or, "That love thy neighbor thing, I meant that. God." You remember these? Or the ominous, "Don't make me come down there. God." Well done. I'm glad you didn't prank me. I did know they were going to do that. Did anybody, seriously, show of hands, anybody remember those billboards? Okay, across the Southeast. Now, I am not clear how this was not viewed as blasphemous, honestly. Instead, it was claimed by Southern Baptists as messages to non-believers, and it was one of the most popular advertising campaigns of the decade. And I remember looking up at those billboards as a high school senior. I used to sit and wonder what a UU billboard would say. "Be yourself, you are loved. Whomever you love, you are welcome. Honor the interconnected web of life." I longed for our church to host the baccalaureate service for graduation instead of having it at the Calvary Baptist Church. And I longed for us to host interfaith prayer breakfasts. In fact, I still long for this reality, and this is my goal here in Atlanta: total benevolent takeover. What else is at stake if we do not share our faith? What is at stake is that people you know and people you love will live their whole lives in isolation, never knowing there was a faith community that would love them, learn with them, and grow with them. We do have one profoundly evangelist time of year at UUCA. Do you know what that is? I mean, do you? Do you know what that is? What's our evangelist time of year at UUCA? Yeah. Our most evangelists, they don't get to answer because they were here earlier. What do you think it is? Pledge Drive? No. Who said Pride? It's Pride. It's Atlanta. It's Pride Sunday. On Pride Sunday, we wear our golden Side with Love UU t-shirts, and we march in the parade. We hand out flags or cards with our congregation's logo and web address unabashedly. This year, I took on the tradition Reverend Anthony began by wearing a full clergy collar, for the first time in my life and walking along the sidelines of the parade, shaking hands with people who had journeyed from around the Southeast and beyond to attend Atlanta Pride. And I was wholly unprepared for what I experienced. I walked along the sidelines of the parade, shaking hands, bestowing blessings to people dressed in drag or making out with their partner or just letting their freak flag fly. I said, "You are blessed and you are beautiful," while hugging them and handing them one of our cards. Many people whooped with joy to see me, yes, when they saw me come down their way. And many people said to me, thank you for being here. And then other people hugged me and cried on my shoulder right there in the parade. And I didn't realize it, but with a simple blessing and just by our presence, we offered healing to people who had been told by someone dressed like me that they were not worthy of God's grace, that they were excluded from the welcome table. And so I returned home, pensive and exhausted from Pride, wondering what other opportunities we were missing out there to share our love and our good news of radical acceptance with our city of Atlanta. Now, some of you out there today may be skeptical when I speak of evangelism, concerned that it does not adhere to the free and responsible search for truth and meaning. Some of you may be here because you are escaping efforts to convert you. And I want to be very clear about the difference between evangelism and proselytizing. Because by definition, evangelism is merely zealous advocacy of a cause. I mean, you can be evangelist about many things. Coffee, singing, as Don is. The word derives from the 12th century, from Old French, late Latin, and early Greek, meaning preacher of the gospel, literally bringer of good news. Also connected to angelos, messenger, angel. Classical Greek meant the reward of good tidings, whereas proselytize means to convert or attempt to convert someone from one religion, belief, or opinion to another. And that word came along 2 centuries later, in the 14th century, from Old French proselyte, late Latin and Greek, convert to Judaism, stranger, one who has come over, surrender, a Gentile converted to Judaism. And I want to be clear that I am talking today about evangelizing and not proselytizing, because we honor all beliefs and respect people's beliefs, but we still have some good news to share. John Luther Adams, the great 20th century Unitarian theologian, had something to say back in the 1950s about our repellent attitude towards evangelism. Adams wrote, "So I would suggest that religious liberals ought to try to learn something about what the progressive evangelicals are doing. We could learn from them the uses of the prophetic elements of the Bible, elements that we have not been aware of, but that they are exploiting to good effect. I would like to hear such perspectives on the radio or in Harvard Memorial Church rather than hearing liberals, including Unitarians, just flatly and uncreatively condemning them." "I hide my face," he wrote, "when that happens. In view of the divisions among the evangelicals, we might even see possibilities in liberalism that are not being realized, such as the way the progressive evangelicals are dealing with the conservatives." James Luther Adams said this long time ago, in the 1950s, and it still felt very true to me today. But what would it even look like to evangelize Unitarian Universalism? I'm reminded of that old Unitarian joke I grew up hearing. What do you get when you cross a Jehovah's Witness with a Unitarian? Someone who comes to your door and doesn't know what to say. So first, first, we must make our congregation a radically, gregariously welcoming space. If you see someone you don't know, greet them in the social hour. Risk making a mistake. Perhaps they're not new here, only new to you. So what? Their evangelist spirit should require them to show you grace for your mistake. And if you notice someone coming into worship service late, please be an usher. We can all be ushers. Join the ushers. Scooch over, make room for them. Help them feel welcome here. Help them feel they belong. That's the easy part. It's still something we have to do, but that's the easy part. How do you talk about your faith in the world? That is an act of love, an act of kindness and generosity. Once you have found something good, don't keep it to yourself. Don't withhold the good from those you love, those you know. Share your moment of call, the moment when you realized you were not just dabbling, but you were a full-fledged UU. If you love something, why not share it? A minister recently said to me, we all share pictures of our food when we go to a good restaurant, and then we recommend that restaurant to our friends. Well, we don't share our faith with the same enthusiasm on social media. So today, I want to encourage you to share a word of inspiration you heard today with your social media friends, or to check in on Facebook that you were at the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Atlanta. And maybe you already do that, which is awesome. But if you don't do it, why don't you start trying to do that? Or just call up a friend who you think would love it here. Don't keep it a secret from them. Don't keep it a secret from them. I want to make sure I was clear. I will close with a story I heard just this last week, where I was at a UU ministers conference. I found myself sitting with Reverend Chris Bice, the minister at the Tennessee Valley Unitarian Universalist Church. He was my director of religious education when I was in middle school. And we were reminiscing about a friend of mine, someone my same age who sadly died a few years ago after a long illness. Her name is Jessica, and she would love that I am preaching about her right now. See, Jessica was a staunch UU her entire life, though the friends that she kept outside of the church were culturally very different than a lot of the UUs who came to church at Tennessee Valley. See, she was friends with a lot of people with less education, less money, people who actively drank or did drugs. She was not a risk-averse person herself. Even as a youth, we voted her most likely to be on the roof during Sunday morning worship. I don't know why, but she was often on the roof. Reverend Chris told me something that I hadn't known about Jessica. He said that in her last year of life, she was bedridden at home and could not get to church. And that whole year, he kept seeing all these visitors show up on Sundays. They were much younger than the average churchgoer, and they dressed a little differently, seemed a little rougher around the edges. And whenever he greeted them and asked how they found out about the church, they responded with a dazed look and replied, "Jessica sent me." And that sums up Jessica perfectly. Above all, she was a deeply generous person. If she found something that she loved or something she found good, she immediately wanted you to have it. She wanted to share it with everyone else. And even in death, Jessica calls to me and to all of us, don't hide the good. If you have found the good, share it. Proclaim it. Use your dying breath to send your loved ones to the thing that saved you every day of your life. That's what Jessica calls to me. So what is a word? What is something you love about UUCA? Something that you would want to share with a friend? Something about Unitarian Universalism that inspires you? Make sure we can all hear you.
Open hearts, open minds.
But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, that kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. Amen.